afternoon. 6 months ago, my sisters Debbie, Linda, and I embarked on a familiar journey to Lichtenfels, Germany, to reclaim our grandfather's driver's license, which had been confiscated by the Nazis 80 years earlier, shortly after Kristallnacht. What started as a trip about our family turned into something so much bigger than us. This is a story about 13 Jewish driver's licenses and a Bavarian town coming to terms with its darkest past. It's a story about discovery, exploration, reflection, and reconciliation. It's a story about human connection. It's a story about doing the right thing. And it's a story about hope. 3 generations of my family, Marx and Oppenheimers, were living as Jews in Lichtenfels in the Upper Franconian region of Bavaria in the 1930s during the rise of Hitler and the Third Reich. My grandpa, Sigmund Marx, and his brother Alfred, my great uncle, owned a prosperous furrier and tanning business, Marx and Baumel, which had been in our family for over 100 years. The brothers eventually married and started families. My grandpa married the love of his life, Frieda Oppenheimer, and they had a beautiful daughter, Marion, my mother, who was born in 1936. Alfred also married the love of his life, Ellen Baumberger, and they had 2 beautiful daughters, Inga, born in 1930, and Hannelore, or Hannah, born in 1932. And I'd like to say Hannah is here with us today. Inga, who is now 89 and living in Florida, accompanied us on our trip to Germany. The Oppenheimers were equally successful. My great-uncle Alfred owned a textile and clothing business, N. Oppenheimer Limited. The Marx and Oppenheimer families were respected citizens of Lichtenfels, a town that for 750 years had a small but vibrant Jewish community. Jews belonged in Lichtenfels. That all changed on November 9, 1938. Last May, while my family was in Florida celebrating my nephew's wedding, my sister Debbie received a curious Facebook message, and she shared it with Linda and I. Dear Mrs. November Ryder, my name is Victoria Thiel, and I am a junior at the Mariner Gymnasium in Lichtenfels, Bavaria. Together with my classmates, I am working on a project called 13 Jewish Driver's Licenses. These licenses were found while digitizing the archives of our town after being forgotten since World War II, which is when they were confiscated. It is our job to find as much information as possible on the owners of these licenses, to recreate their lives and honor them in an exhibition in November. My partner, Clara Mueller, and I were assigned the brothers Sigmund and Alfred Marx, which is why I'm contacting you. And there was more to it, but I'll stop there. We were stunned and incredulous, and we were extremely intrigued. After vetting Victoria and confirming this wasn't a hoax, over the next 6 months, we fired up our scanners and began emailing precious photos and family documents. In the process, we were able to connect Victoria's classmates, Clara, to Alfred Marx's daughter and granddaughters. By early summer, we received an invitation to travel to Lichtenfels during the week of November 5th through 9th. The town was planning a week-long series of events to commemorate the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht. Every descendant of the 13 licenses was invited to attend and be guests of honor. There were 9 families representing 13 licenses. 3 of the 13 licenses belonged to my family. My sisters, cousins, and I were on board. Alfred Marx's oldest daughter, Inga, the matriarch of our group, would also be coming. As a Holocaust survivor, her memories and perspective would be invaluable Passports were renewed and airfare was purchased. We were excited and a little nervous to begin an important family journey 80 years in the making. We were a group of 7 ranging in age from 18 to a spry 88-year-old. Last fall, on November 2nd, my sisters and I flew to Munich. We had a 24-hour layover and were able to tour Dachau concentration camp with the infamous words Arbeit macht frei, which means work make one's free on the entrance gate. It was an emotionally devastating experience, but it was important for us to see. Many of the Lichtenfeld Jews were imprisoned in Dachau after Kristallnacht. After an emotional afternoon, we drove 3 hours into the Bavarian countryside. That evening, there was a welcome dinner with our German hosts. We met the students and their teacher, Manfred Rochamla Lambrecht, for the first time after many months of emailing. Other descendants of the 13 who were able to make the trip were there as well. We met the granddaughters of Leo Bonneman and Jenny and Joseph Krauss. There were other descendants who weren't able to attend but were planning future visits to Lichtenfels in the spring. We also learned that some families were never found and others wanted nothing to do with this project or anything to do with Germany. We were welcomed by Christian Meisner, the district administrator of Lichtenfels, which is a position similar to our Westchester County executive here. What he said next was unprecedented. He recounted the story of how the 13 licenses were found in 2017 while digitizing town records. We learned that they'd been languishing in a brown folder in the bottom of a desk drawer for 80 years. They probably had been found many times over the years, but no one was sure what to do with them. They were a brutal reminder of the atrocities perpetrated on the town's Jewish community. So they stayed hidden in a dark, like a dark, ugly secret, out of sight, out of mind. He explained that by law, he was required to send the licenses to Bamberg, where historical documents from the Upper Franconian district are archived. He knew he had to do the right thing and tried to reunite the licenses with their descendants. He saw that there was a difference between law and justice. That singular and courageous decision put us, descendants and Germans, on a path towards understanding. So how do you begin to locate descendants? Christian approached Manfred, his former teacher, with a strong social conscience and moral compass pointing north, to see if this could be a project for his History Peace Seminar class. With Manfred on board to expertly guide the students through their research, along with his colleague Verena Shire to assist with translating all the material, 13 Jewish driver's licenses was conceived. The project had 2 objectives. First and foremost, reunite descendants with the licenses, which, by the way, I have my grandfather and great uncle's licenses up here in front. Secondly, through the research, recreate what happened in Lichtenfels during and after Kristallnacht, and use it as a teachable moment, especially given the political climate in Germany today with the resurgence of the far right. The licenses were a gateway that allowed the town to begin atoning for its past. The following day, the students were presenting their research. Christian invited us to the district office for a small reception beforehand. We had an opportunity to share our feelings of what finding the licenses meant to us. My sister Linda spoke poignantly about our grandfather and the staggering sacrifices our family made to survive. They were heavy, powerful words. The Germans listened respectfully. Their questions and comments were thoughtful and sensitive. They provided us with a safe environment to express ourselves, which helped to navigate the emotional roller coaster we were on. Every memory required us to travel into the painful past and face hard truths. There was no question how important and necessary it was for the town to accept responsibility for the atrocities born out of Kristallnacht. We were invited to sign the Golden Book, a large ornate ledger reserved for visiting dignitaries. For us, it was surreal. What a tremendous gesture of respect. As the granddaughter of Sigmund Marx, whose license languished in a desk drawer, whose good name was worthless to the Germans 80 years ago, that good name was now being honored and recognized. After the descendants signed, the students, Manfred and Christian, signed names under ours. The town of Lichtenfels and the Jewish descendants were being linked again, but this time it was through inclusivity. Following the ceremony, it was time to hear the students' presentations. We went to the gymnasium that held about 300 people, where we were given reserved seats in the front row. The media was there, TV, radio, and newspapers. The 13 Jewish driver's licenses project had been well publicized, and the community turned out. It wasn't lost on us that for some of the residents, their ancestors were Nazi sympathizers who participated in the rioting on Kristallnacht. And yet, here they were, ready to face their country's and town's darkest chapter in human history. What made the evening's attendance remarkable is that after Kristallnacht, once the Jews fled or were imprisoned and sent off to concentration camps, the Jewish community was eradicated. In 2019, there still are no Jews living in Lichtenfels. At the start of the program, we were given translation headsets so we could follow along. As you would expect, there were introductory remarks, and then we were introduced. When our name was called, Sigmund Marx's granddaughter stood proudly, almost in defiance, and faced the audience. It wasn't just about a name anymore. When you put a face to a name, you can't help but remember. The students presented their research. What moved me the most was how reverently they spoke about the 13. The words of Sophie Roth, who researched Leo Wolf, were heartbreakingly honest and have stayed with me. I revisit them often. She said, "The most important thing I could experience and learn was that in a mass of people, there are a million individual destinies, a million people who are someone's child, someone's lover, or have children of their own, who have their own personality, their own dreams, and their own story. That means the most to me." Each presentation was fascinating, each story of suffering and survival devastating. We could see it in the students' eyes, hear it in their voices, and see the depth of sorrow on their faces as they recounted each story of the 13. Every person in that auditorium was transfixed and witnessing something extraordinary. A deep, profound connection had been made with the 13 Jews. The students humanized the faces on those licenses. They internalized the horrors of death and the suffering and struggles of survival. They could imagine it. What if this had been their grandparents? All because they worshiped differently? They were sympathetic, but more importantly, empathetic. Each student formed a deep connection with the life attached to the license. Our family members became their family members. Inga also addressed the audience. In her flawless German, she spoke eloquently about her family's struggle to survive, and despite that struggle, how they went on to rebuild their lives in America. She said, "We refuse to let that experience defeat us and crush us like bugs." What happened next is a memory that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Christian Meisner returned the licenses to us, just like that. A simple physical gesture with enormous emotional impact. To be able to reclaim a part of our family, 6 months later, it's still difficult to articulate what that has meant to us. To touch the licenses, it was as if we were reaching through time and hugging our 39-year-old grandfather and our great-uncle Alfred Oppenheimer and saying, "It's okay now." We were bringing them home. Was it a moment of closure? Yes. But more symbolic and consequential was the town's commitment to examining its past, learning from it through this younger generation, so that these atrocities can never happen again. Following the presentation, there was a reception where the 13 Jewish licenses banners were on display. A private local foundation sponsored the exhibit and contributed what amounts to $8,000. The banners you see here today and out in the lobby are replicas, translated by the students from German into English. I hope you all have a chance to read some of them, if not all of them. Each story is remarkable. And when you read them, remember that this was not a project by Jewish students, but by Christian students. Most, if not all, had never met a Jew before we traveled to Lichtenfels, who dedicated a year of their lives to learn about our family and their lives in Lichtenfels. It's truly astonishing what they have accomplished. Throughout the week, we toured Lichtenfels with the Upper Franconian District Curator, Professor Dr. Gunther Dippold, and learned about its rich history. Through the town archivist, Christine Wittenbauer, we had access to the Lichtenfels Jewish Cemetery, kept locked, as all Jewish cemeteries are in Germany, because they are historical sites. Today, there aren't many headstones left, 3 out of 150, because the cemetery was desecrated after Kristallnacht. The headstones were ground into gravel and used to pave the town roads. There is a large headstone which memorializes the residents who perished during the Holocaust. 3 names belong to my family: Betty, Alfred, and Annie Oppenheimer. The 3 stones you see on top were placed there by my sisters and I. They will stay there forever, and forever be linked with us. Community members made every effort to avail themselves to us and facilitate our familial journey of exploration, discovery, and reflection. It also compelled the Germans to revisit the darkest stain on their past. It was painful and uncomfortable for all of us, but we were traveling on parallel paths, heading towards a place of acceptance. November 9th, our final day, we laid 8 Stolpersteine between the Marx and Oppenheimer homes. The Stolpersteine project was created in 1992 by German artist Gunter Demnig to memorialize Jews who were persecuted by the Nazis. The Stolpersteine are placed in front of the individual's last known, freely chosen residence. Each stone starts with the words, "Here lived." 1 stone, 1 name, 1 person. We met at the town hall where Andreas Hugerich, the mayor, welcomed us with these words. Today, we feel the more the duty and the responsibility that these people who experienced such a sorrow will never be forgotten. Such cruel events may never be repeated. The victims were among us. They were human beings, and they have the right to never be forgotten. As a city, we want to set a signal that the victims won't be forgotten, a signal against racism and anti-Semitism, a signal for tolerance, openness, and humanity. Inga had another opportunity to address those gathered, and it was a rather large crowd. She reiterated her powerful message of strength and resilience. Then everyone walked to the first location for the Stolpersteine, in front of the former Oppenheimer home. Tragically, they weren't able to flee Lichtenfels or Germany, and ultimately were imprisoned and eventually exterminated in Sobibor in 1942. While Mr. Demnig painstakingly prepared the site where he would lay the 3 stones, Alfred's story was retold by Louisa, the student who researched his fate. Inga's 18-year-old granddaughter Ellie read a Yom HaShoah prayer. Mayor Hugerich placed white roses next to the stones. As we had done all week, we wept. From there, we walked to the former Marx residence at Baumberger Strasse 19, the home where our great-grandmother Johanna Marx, our grandfather Sigmund, grandmother Frida, our mother Marion, our great-uncle Alfred, great-aunt Ellen, and their daughters Inga and Hannah lived. The process of laying the stones was repeated. Here lived our family, and their names have been brought back into the light from a dark, horrific past. The Stolpersteine will always be a reminder of what happened 80 years ago. They will call out to anyone who comes upon them to stop and read them and remember. That evening, we attended the remembrance service at the synagogue at Judengasse 12. Translated into English, Juden means Jewish, and Gasse means alley or small street. The synagogue, which had been destroyed during Kristallnacht, was eventually restored decades later. It's no longer an active, vibrant synagogue, since there is no Jewish community left in Lichtenfels. Today it serves as a community center. When we arrived, night had fallen, and there were about 150 people from the community gathered in the synagogue courtyard and street beyond. There was a large 7-branched candelabrum that closely resembled a menorah, candles ablaze. A beautiful service with music and prayers followed. Together, Jews and Gentiles sang Shalom Aleichem, which means peace be upon you. It brought me to tears. The minister of the town spoke about the brutality and cruelness that took place on Kristallnacht, and how important it was to remember those darkest days so that it can never happen again. In a symbolic gesture of solidarity and respect, community members would stand guard and protect the synagogue throughout the night until dawn's first light. Following the service, all were welcomed into the synagogue where the 13 Jewish driver's licenses exhibit was officially unveiled. Reading the banners challenges you to examine the darkest chapter in human history, a chapter that is quickly fading into memory. Reading the banners requires us to bear witness and say never again. This experience changed my life, all our lives, in the most profound way. For me, it's been a call to action. This story is so important and it must be told. In the past year, we have witnessed the horrors of Charlottesville, Pittsburgh, and most recently Poway. We live in a world where words of hatred have become commonplace and accepted. It was words of hatred that ignited the Holocaust. But I also know that action speaks louder than any hateful word. All I have to do is look back to our time in Lichtenfels. We are eternally grateful for what the Germans gave back to us, our families' good names. Everyone who touched our hearts, especially the students, have become role models for sustainable commemorative work in Germany. To date, about 5,000 people have visited the exhibit throughout Bavaria, and it's being recognized throughout Germany. That makes me hopeful, very hopeful indeed. I want to thank the Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center for the opportunity to share this extraordinary experience with you. I also want to thank all of those who helped to make this exhibit a reality. On behalf of the descendants and the Germans, we are proud to introduce the 13 Jewish driver's licenses exhibit to an American audience. Thank you for listening.
Lisa is going to introduce her family, who is with us today.
Thank you. I'd like to call up my sisters, Debbie November Ryder and Linda Tooten, and my cousin, Edith's daughters, Suzanne Schlesinger, who traveled all the way from Austin, Texas, and Nancy Stanley. We were all together on this journey.
We have time for just a 3-minute Q&A if anyone has any burning questions they'd like